I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals. It's October 7th, 2018, and that is Tropical Storm Michael, a storm with 50-mile-an-hour winds. It developed as a tropical storm this afternoon, and as of this evening, it is in the far western Caribbean, eventually going to start to move faster and faster to the north. Keep in mind, if you're on the north central Gulf Coast, it is coming toward you, especially here in the News 5 area. It will likely be a hurricane in a couple of days. Right now, no watches for the north central Gulf Coast, but because the storm will be moving fast, whatever it does, it should be limited both in time and also in impact. Not to say it can't be a strong storm. So as of late Sunday afternoon, 50-mile-an-hour winds, forecasts, projections from multiple computer models all go northward. They start at different locations simply because it's hard to figure out where the storm is, at least when the models were run. But notice where the models end on Wednesday. Some keep it in the Gulf. Some take it into east central Alabama. Some take it farther east. Some take it farther west. All of that is to be expected. Not one of those is likely exactly correct. And we take all of them together to give us ideas of what the scenarios are that we could face. So, for example, we do know that this system will likely become a Category 1, if not Category 2 hurricane. And at the same time that it moves into the Gulf and strengthens, and then by Wednesday maybe makes landfall, it will get caught up in the stronger steering winds out of the north. And what that means, it's going to zip faster to the eastern seaboard. And that's why when it gets close to land, the impacts should be limited in terms of rainfall, number one, because it will be moving more steadily, and then the possibility for it to become an extremely powerful storm are also limited. But 100 miles an hour, that's still strong enough. That would be Category 2 strength on Wednesday midday. And when you look at that forecast cone, remember, it's made of a bunch of circles where you project where you think the center of the storm will be at a given point in time. So Wednesday, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the center, in a perfect forecast based on that projection, would be southwest of Apalachicola. But it could be inland near Dothan, it could be farther eastward still in the Gulf, or much farther south in the Gulf. In fact, as of late afternoon, I'm starting to see a couple more computer models that are starting to slow it down. But we can only deal with what we know right now. And this is still a ways away. So remember the basics. You know, a hurricane, tropical storm, it's a big spinning mass of thunderstorms coming out of the tropics. And on the northern Gulf Coast, typically they come in from the south and go to the north. All of them are made of feeder bands, bands of thunderstorms that feed into the middle. And closer to the middle, around that center, around the eye, is the eye wall. And that's typically where you get the strongest winds on average. Now, that means, for example, Michael, with 50-mile-an-hour winds, it wouldn't have them everywhere. They would typically be somewhere in the eye wall. However, the other half of the story is, even when you get rid of the eye wall, still your strongest winds tend to be on the right side of the path. That's also where you tend to have the heaviest rain, literally, because it's pulling it in from the Gulf of Mexico and sending it northward. And that's also where you have the threat, the higher threat of tornadoes. So right side of the path, that's the worst side, especially when you consider storm surge. The wind, the circulation around the hurricane, pushes water up against the coastline. The water rises, moves uphill, and that can do some serious damage. And while all that happens on the right side, the left side is where you have an offshore wind that's blowing from land, which is typically drier, out toward the water. So you want to be on the left side of the path of any tropical storm or hurricane, regardless of which way it's moving. Here's one computer projection. Moving through Monday into Tuesday, when the Gulf of Mexico gets really rough with dangerous rip currents, and then Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. It shows the center of circulation south of Destin, Florida. It shows from most of the News 5 area an offshore wind, which is a good thing for us, but that's just one computer model. Now remember, no one of them is correct, and even if it were correct right now, nobody can tell you which one is correct. That's why we look at multiple models. So by Wednesday morning, 6 a.m., this other model has it farther to the west, basically south of Pensacola, the center of the storm. And remember, a storm is not just one point, it's a broad area. Even in this scenario, most of the News 5 area gets that northeast wind, but this takes it a little closer toward Mobile Bay. And that means watch carefully. Still, this is 6 o'clock Wednesday evening. It shows landfall, it moving toward southeastern Alabama, and then very quickly, Wednesday night into Thursday, it takes it out toward the Carolinas. So again, this should be a steady mover, but some computer models now are showing me a somewhat slower scenario. Be prepared for anything. That's the bottom line. What I do expect, though, based on this system and where it's more likely to go, is just a couple, if not several inches of rain across most of the News 5 area. That's 13 counties covering 10,000 square miles, and mostly to the east of Interstate 65, mostly in the Florida Panhandle. That's where 3 to 6 inches of rain looks likely right now. Likely, possible, these are all words we use with tropical weather for a storm that is hundreds of miles away from making landfall on the northern Gulf Coast, which is the most likely scenario. Stay updated, have a plan, don't be scared, be prepared. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals.